Got to.
My vote is good, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين محمد بن عبد الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وأصحابه والذين يتبعونهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Again, I'd like to thank all of you for coming out. Today I'm going to be talking about my new publication, I Buried Malcolm, and my family relationship in that buried, inshallah ta'ala. This is a short version, so inshallah I'm not going to keep you long. Just kind of like introduce you to what the actual book contents are. The name of the book is the final chapter, I Buried Malcolm, the legacy of Haji Sham Jaabir. We're going to explain that. My father always told me to make sure that you understand the author before you read the book. So I am the author of the book, and my name is Muhammad bin Sham Jaabir. I am the CEO of the Bureau of Indigenous Muslim Affairs. I worked in the capacity of an imam, a da'i, radio host, Muslim Talk Radio, BIMA. Also, I've been involved in the political circles, especially trying to resolve issues that was challenging to the Muslims, and I worked in that area as well. Alhamdulillah. I am the author of Color Me Muslim. I think some of the brothers in this city has purchased that book, have read that book. That book was about my life growing up in America. I was born in Jim Crow South. I experienced segregated schools, segregated fountains, theaters, all the above. And I'm also the author of Bilal ibn Rabah, Ibn Arab, the son of Ibn Arab, Racism, Colorism in Islam. I address all of those issues from antiquity, classic Islamic texts, how racism crept in and how it affected the people of color up until this day. So I'm author of that book as well, inshallah, it'll be coming soon. And also the book, I Buried Malcolm, I am the co-author. My father wrote the first book, and I actually contributed 2 chapters to that book, and also commentary, footnotes, a lot of research into that project. It's about 255 pages, mashallah. I am the son of Haji Sham Jaabir. Yarhamullah, may Allah has mercy on him and forgive him from all of his shortcomings and sins. He was the national imam for the Adinullah Universal Arabic Association, and this picture is in 1962, after he had made the pilgrimage to Mecca, mashallah. My father belonged to one of the oldest indigenous Islamic communities in America. And it was founded in 1938. We go way back, 1938. And I wasn't even born, mashallah. And it was founded by Professor Muhammad Izzuddin, Yarhamullah. And this is our General Assembly annual gathering in Izzuddin Village. In fact, we had a village named after our community that was given to us by the city. In Hamilton, New Jersey, and this is in 1940. As you can see, the numbers are not that great, okay, but Islam was there. This is people of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. In 1943, this was called the Uniting Islamic Society of America, the first convention that was held in Philadelphia in 1943. And as you can see, we're standing in front of the wall, and the person standing in the center is Professor Muhammad Izzuddin. And on the right, you got Sheikh Nasr Ahmed, and you have Hajj Wali Akram. I don't know if you're familiar with the first Masjid of Cleveland, the first mosque of Cleveland, that was founded by Imam Wali Akram. And I put Hajj Wala Akram there for a reason. We're going to talk about that later on. And then on the left, we have Sheikh Ahmed Dawood Faisal, who established the Islamic community in New York. It's known now as the State Street Masjid, mashallah, the American Muslim Mission in America by Sheikh Ahmed Dawood Faisal. And in this particular photo, you will see people that made a difference as they began to go out and establish Islam. That, of course, is an FBI declassified file, and of course, that's in the 40s. And it tells you in the yellow, the Dino Lad Universal Arabic Association, along with the Muslims of America Academy, and also the Islam International Incorporated. You have the Temple of Islam there. I researched that organization. I don't know how they was connected because they went out of focus. And we have the Islamic Association of Muslims, the Muslim 10-year plan, Universal Muslim League of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Missionary. And the purpose of this coming together was to organize and educate all the Muslims and bring them under one banner. James Lomax Bey. James Lomax Bey was the governor of the Moorish Science Temple number 4 in Detroit. Okay? And of course, as you see him standing at the right of Drew Ali with the red square around his head, this is 1928. Who was Lomax Bey? Lomax Bey was the second signature on the organization charter for the Moorish Science Temple. And of course, he was ejected from that particular community. Why? Because he refused to follow the Moorish Science Temple theology after Girardi had introduced the Circle 7 in 1927 and declared himself a prophet. So Lomax Bey defected, and from that, he began to travel outside the country. I don't want to deal too much with the Aqidah of the theology of the Moorish Science Temple. As we know, they introduced a book called the Holy Quran, which is actually the Circle 7. It was almost a plagiarized version of the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus Christ, written by Levi Downey, and also Unto Thee I Grant, which is a Rosicrucian type philosophy and Masonic order. It's kind of like all blended in there together. And that was his doctrine, and that's why Lomax Bey left that particular community. And of course, we know we had Muslims that were here, that was here in America, in this particular city itself. That was Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. The person on the left here is Dus Muhammad Ali. Okay, and he's embracing an imam at an Eid al-Adha celebration. Now we got to go back to 1920s. When we had segregation, and to see this type of effect of a person, a Syrian, Lebanese with white complexion, embracing a person. Dus Ali was from Sudan, a person of darker hue. This was unthinkable in America in the 1920s. You see, and he also established Universal Islamic Society in Detroit, Michigan. And you can see that was an icebreaker. And also, we know we had the Ahmadiyya movement. It came with Mufti Muhammad Sadiq. They established their missionary schools throughout Chicago and Detroit, so forth and so on. This is the person that we need to know. This is Sheikh al-Islam to America, Seti Majid. Very, very little information is written about him. Who was this particular person? He came to America in the 1920s, Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And he himself established 4 institutions. Okay, the Muslim Unity Society, the Islamic Missionary Society, the Red Crescent Society, the Islamic Benevolent Society. And all of this was based on Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And he himself was very adamant about getting a fatwa or a legal ruling against the Ahmadiyya movement and the Morrison's Temple. Now, Lomax Bey, as I mentioned earlier, was the co-signer of the Morrison's Temple charter. When he defected, the first place they went was Turkey. If you can see in the yellow, it says U.S. Negro Muslims, hunts jobs in Turkey, not U.S. Negro Moors. Okay, so we need to understand the dynamics of that statement. And the word Negro was a social classification of people of color in the 20s, 30s, and so forth. It changed to colors, African-American, so forth and so on. But it's talking about one and the same people. And these are actually translated or independent press from Turkey talking about this migration. Okay, Detroit's Negro Muslim hunt jobs in Turkey. There is where Professor Muhammad Ezzeddin went. At that time, he was known as Muhammad Ali Muhammad Bey. So he had that particular name. And a long story short, he went to Turkey, could not find any stability because Turkey was suffering from World War I. Okay, they were in ruins. So it was very difficult for them to find any stability. As you know, he actually ended up getting a job digging sewers, trenches for bathrooms. So that wasn't that attractive to them. So they began to break away and they began to travel to the Middle East, and some of them came back to America. However, Professor Muhammad Ezzeddin went to Egypt, to the General Central World Youth Muslim Association in Cairo, Egypt. And it's there that he studied 5 years of Islam. This is the same person that was with Durali in 1929, who made the transition and went to Cairo. If anyone been to Egypt, show of hands. Anyone ever been to Egypt at Al-Azhar to visit that facility? MashaAllah. We have two facilities there. We have the Jamiatul Azhar and we have Jamir al-Azhar. One is the Masjid University and one is the college. So if you go into the courtyards of the Masjid college, you will see various schools like Tawheed, Arabiya, Fiqh, Sirah, so forth and so on. So you will study in these little institutions, and that's what he studied for 5 years intensively, and he came back to America and he established the Adinu Allahi Jamiatul Arabiya Ummiyya, and that is, I'm a recipient of that organization. My father was the national imam of that. And people would say, well, why we don't know anything about the Adinu Allahi Universal Arabic Association? Of course, we was tagged in the forums. You see, FBI oversight. They infiltrated, interrogated their members. And of course, they frightened a lot of them, and they controlled the narrative, and they marginalized that particular community. So the Ahlul Sunnah component of Islam was restricted. Okay? And you can see here, this is another file of Professor Muhammad Ezzeddin that was under scrutiny by the Department of Justice. Okay? Now, fast forward. I'm the author or co-author of the book I Buried Malcolm, and the response to this second edition, right, was because of our sister Betty, Hajj Bahia Shabazz. Her name is, her Arabic name is Bahia, and she also made Hajj. She made Hajj the very same year, in fact, a month after the assassination of her husband, Hashmi Shiraz, and she was pregnant with twins. And she said herself that if it was not for the Hajj, she don't think she could have handled the trauma. So she was able to make the Hajj. And her concern was, when are the Muslims going to claim Malcolm? The liberals claim Malcolm, the black nationalists claim Malcolm, but when will the Muslims claim Malcolm? As you know, Malcolm was ostracized, and he was hated for 50 years after his association, after his assassination. I call it an execution. But no one really focused or had information about Malcolm beyond one text, the autobiography of Malcolm X by Alex Taylor. Beyond that, he was definitely rejected from the public library, especially in the South. You have to find him in alternative bookstores and things of that nature. Now, on the left is the first edition of my father's work. and it consists of 175 pages. And as you can see on the cover, the person that is standing there with the ghusl on his head, he's standing at the gravesite. Okay? And when we began to, in fact, that book is out of print, but when we decided to do a second edition, we critically analyzed the cover. Because if you look at that cover, it doesn't really validate him actually doing the janazah. Because you have people standing around him, you just see him making dua, which we do for our deceased. So we wanted to make it crystal clear that Malcolm was a Muslim. So we took a classic picture that you see in all of the papers and magazines and so forth of him, my father making the takbir. This is the actual beginning of the janazah, okay? And on the back of the book, you see we put the other picture of him standing at the gravesite. And my father, he said two key things. Where the Muslim world had been silent, we had been outspoken. Where the world had been shocked and confused, we had been steadfast and organized. Where all had succumbed to fear and threat, we affirmed our faith in Allah for the world to witness. Because when Al-Hajj Shabazz was assassinated, there were phone calls made from the State Department, U.S. State Department, warning and cautioning our immigrant brothers who were here not to go near that situation. It was too politically energized, so they had to stay away from it. And that's why my father made that particular comment. And he also said, history has recorded my participation at the janazah of Hajj Malik, but few in history have ever reported or known that we were members of the oldest indigenous Sunni Muslim community in North America, born, raised, and touched by Allah on the soil of the United States, indicating that we were an indigenous Muslim organization. My father wrote the first book because he was disappointed with the movie Malcolm X. Okay? In fact, Spike Lee was the director. My family was a part of the consultation board as to how we're going to actually present Malcolm to the public. Okay, and in fact, I was actually supposed to play my father in that particular movie. The politics got in it, and that was in 1992. I was a lot younger, so mashallah. But the politics got in it, and they pulled the plug. And they highlighted more of Malcolm's life before he became a Muslim, and very, very little of his life as a Muslim, and very, very little of his life after he took the Shahada and made the pilgrimage to Mecca, and his confessions and his regrets. As we know, Malcolm reinvented himself more than one time. So my father was a little upset, so we encouraged him to write a book to try to correct the narrative. And of course, in the red, this is what his sister, Ella Collins, says, Malcolm's sister. She said the movie was symbolism without substance. And if you look deep into the life of Hajj Shabazz, of course, all of that is outlined in the book. You will see why she made that particular statement. Because most people only know Malcolm through literature. There's so many books written about Malcolm, and in fact, 99% of the books that have been written about Malcolm were written by non-Muslims. And we know that it takes a Muslim to be able to articulate the actual spiritual transition that Al-Hajj Shabazz made, leaving, because the Shahada includes the negation and the affirmation. You have to leave off something in order to affirm something, and a non-Muslim cannot articulate that. And we have the autobiography of Malcolm X, okay, as told to Alex Haley. But I call it as told by Alex Haley because we know the book wasn't published until Malcolm was assassinated, and we know that there were chapters that were left out. Okay, as you can see, it said needs some pen work. So upon the death of Al-Hajj Shabazz, Alex Haley had, the green light to actually edit the book anyway, and however he saw that it would be politically correct. And I remind you that As my father told me, always studying an author before you read the book. And we know that Alex Haley was a Republican, he was a conservative, and he had opposing views, even though he was a journalist, and writing the story of Malcolm was his biggest job. And when Al-Hajj Shabazz sit down with him, I'm going to be using Malcolm and Al-Hajj back and forth. It's the same person, it's just that, you know, for the correctness and the continuity that we understand. In fact, that was his first job. And when Malcolm went to him, he was a member of the Nation of Islam, and he actually wanted to write about the Nation of Islam. He wanted to be able to give the Nation of Islam some exposure. And he said all the proceeds from this book would go towards the Nation of Islam. However, those dynamics changed later on. So we come to Malcolm X. You know, he's a very, very complicated individual, you know, because we have Malcolm Little. You know, there's a difference. You know, Malcolm Little was a person who grew up in a very hostile society, segregated schools where he had thousands of lynchings and state-supported terrorist groups like the KK Klan, the Black Legions, and so forth. So Malcolm was an angry person. In fact, I don't think he was angry enough based on the violence that was levied towards him from the white supremacist groups and so forth and so on. But he was restricted. He couldn't do a lot of different things. And again, I grew up, I understand that. I don't look at Malcolm as a history. You know, I look at it as an era in which I experienced too. I can recall drinking from fountains that said color, going to the top of the theater to watch the movies in segregated schools. So this is an ongoing experience with me, okay? Malcolm Little was the kid who had a very tragic life. You know, when he was 4 years old, his family home was burned to the ground. You know, and by the time he was 6 years old, his father was brutally beaten and thrown on a trolley car. You know, and then his mother spent 25 years in an insane asylum, the Kalamazoo mental institution. So Malcolm was traumatized, and he was running from his past. You know, he couldn't face his past. So what did it do? It led him to drugs. It led him to the life of crime and all these types of things. And he became delinquent in those schools because they were separated. So he had to go live with his sister in Boston. That was Ella Collins. Okay, she tried to nurture him and give him the mother love that he was missing and so forth. However, it still didn't solve his problem. Malcolm turned to a life of crime. Okay, and we know that he ended up spending about 7 years, you know, in the institution, the penal institution. And it was there that Malcolm himself became Malcolm X, because he was introduced to the Nation of Islam. And he and his brothers, Filbert and Wilbert, who were actually Garveyites, okay? Because Malcolm's father, Earl Little, was a Garveyite. He ran a chapter. And that's what caused him to run into a lot of opposition with the white supremacist groups. But his brothers were looking for a Garvey temple in Chicago. They migrated here, and they found the Nation of Islam. And that was the closest thing that gave them a black power platform to strike back. And of course, they joined the Nation of Islam, and they would constantly visit Malcolm in prison and try to get him to join the Nation of Islam. And of course, we know the history of the Nation of Islam. It was founded by W.D. Fard Muhammad, and it was maintained by Elijah Muhammad up until Wallace Muhammad made the transition. Muhammad made the transition in 1975, bringing that entire community on Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And also, we know about the split down the road. But this was the theology of the Nation of Islam. Most of it was contained in the Message to the Black Man, How Satan Has Arrived. And these books are probably available if you want to actually do, you know, some more research on that. But Malcolm came out of the institution running. I mean, really inspiring, very zealous, and in fact, you know, every platform, every opportunity he had to strike back, he did it. And he attracted very profound personalities like Muhammad Ali. And this was the traction that they got. All eyes was on the Nation of Islam and their movement. And again, the Muhammad Speaks was a paper that Malcolm actually started circulation. That was actually his product to enhance and make sure that the message of the Nation of Islam got out there. But Malcolm knew about Sunni Islam. Okay, a lot of people are under the impression that Malcolm knew nothing about Sunni Islam. In fact, a brother by the name of Abu Hanif used to visit Malcolm, and and Malcolm Jaabir while they was incarcerated. Assalamu alaikum. I knew that person. Alhamdulillah. And so Malcolm knew about Sunni Islam, but he just wasn't interested. He just didn't have the ingredients that he needed to strike back. And also when he was actually teaching the doctrine of the Nation of Islam, he was constantly approached by Muslims of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Okay, for example, we had Yahya Hayari, he was from Sudan, who approached Malcolm in Philadelphia when he was teaching, and so forth. So he was always constantly being approached by people of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And of course, the Nation of Islam went through some challenges because the fact that no one actually knew who Farad Muhammad was. He was a mystery man, and finally some people found some documents and they posted it, and it created a big rift in the Nation of Islam. Now when we look at this person here on the left, that person is named Ahmed Usman. He's from Sudan. He approached Malcolm in the 60s. He was a student at Durham University, and he was just walking, him and his friends, and they went to Temple number 7 in Harlem. They went upstairs, and lo and behold, Malcolm was preaching the doctrine of the white man, the devil. Okay, and he approached Malcolm and he said, "There is no human being you can call the devil in Islam." Okay, and of course he felt intimidated because there was 500 people listening to Malcolm. But alhamdulillah, through that connection, him and Malcolm had a lifetime relationship. In fact, he was instrumental in Malcolm leaving the theology of the Nation of Islam and embracing Sunni Islam. The big blunder with Malcolm is when he made the statement, "It's a case of the chickens coming home to us." When President Kennedy was assassinated, Malcolm made this particular statement. How it was taken out of context, and of course he was silenced by that statement. And through that episode, Malcolm had an opportunity to go to 72nd Street, and Riverside Drive in New York, to sit with the Sunni Muslims, Sheikh Dawood Faisal, State Street Masjid. Also, my father was a part of the transitional team to try to get Malcolm to change his views on Islam. When Malcolm left the Nation of Islam, he established the OAAU, the Organization of Afro-American Unity, and he wanted to use that as a political platform to continue with the social justice movement, dealing with all people who were oppressed, whether they was domestic or foreign, and established Muslim Mosque Incorporated, which was the religious foundation. Look at the bottom, it says, "You may be shocked by these words coming from me." We're going to revisit that inshallah ta'ala. Now, Malcolm was not the only one who defected from the Nation of Islam. Anyone familiar with Dr. Akbar Muhammad? Show of hands. Okay. Yes, he defected from the Nation of Islam in the 60s as well. In fact, he himself acquired his PhD in Al-Azhar. He's an Azhari graduate, and he went on record and he actually rejected the theology of the Nation of Islam. And we know also Imam Wali Muhammad had left the Nation of Islam up until when Hashim Shabbat was assassinated, and of course he went back and stayed 10 years, and at the 10th of that, he caused a major transition. And he said, "I was born under the influence of my father ideas of Islam that he got from his teacher, a foreigner called Farad Muhammad. I was influenced by that idea. Some may say you were born Muslim. No, I still think I was a convert to Islam. I consider myself a convert to Islam. We've always known about Islam." And he said, "I've always known about Islam. I've always had an interest in Islam, but that concept of Islam, the NOI, was incorrect. So I consider myself a convert to Islam." This is a statement of Imam Muhammad. So it was kind of known within inside of that group that there was some dissent. And this is a picture at the top is Elijah Muhammad when he made Umrah in 1959, and that's his son Akbar Muhammad sitting on the right, and Elijah Muhammad at the bottom when he visited Sudan. So they were in the company, okay, of the Sunni, okay, and this is a picture of Imam Wali Muhammad being taught Arabic. Jamal Diab was one of the teachers. I had an opportunity to meet the son of Jamal Diop in 1980 in Mecca, and we had some discussions about his involvement as an instructor for the Nation of Islam. I also was a classmate with Malcolm's brother, Wilfred Muhammad, and we had some discussions about their feelings about the Nation of Islam as well. Again, Akbar teaching Arabic, as you can see, Al-Fatiha. This is Al-Fatiha, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and he has the Fatiha written in Arabic. So the idea that Islam was not present is a misnomer. And again, we see Imam Wahid Muhammad writing in Arabic at the bottom, making that major transition for the community in 1975. And that brings us to Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz. Okay, and this is the third invention of Malcolm himself. Here you see, this is the Shahada certificate from the Islamic Foundation of New York. In the red, it says April 8, 1964. Okay, Malik al-Shabazz. That's before he went to Mecca. Okay, because at that time, you just couldn't get on the plane, get a visa, and make Hajj. You had to actually be recognized as a Sunni Muslim, Ahl Sunnah Jama'ah, because there were so many different pseudo-Islamic groups that the Hajj ministry had to have an oversight as to who would come in and out of the holy precincts of Mecca. So Malcolm had to go before the Imam, a recognized entity, to take his Shahada. And Malcolm ended up going to Mecca. But the Hajj ministry weren't convinced that Malcolm was a true Muslim. They were still suspicious that he was harboring the doctrine of the Nation of Islam. So he ended up being retrieved from the plane in Jeddah, and he was taken to the Hajj courts, and he was examined about Islam. They were actually a series of questions, and if you didn't answer them right, then of course you did not go beyond the city of Jeddah. Okay, and of course, as we know, Malcolm was inquisitive. He was very, very, very intelligent, and he answered all the questions correctly. Okay, and what is unique about this photo here, that's actually Prince Faisal. He wasn't the king until November of 1964. And he was instrumental in abolishing slavery in Saudi Arabia. Believe it or not, slavery was legal in Saudi Arabia up until 1962. Unbelievable, okay? 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation in this country, those Muslim countries continue to have slavery in their society, mashallah. Now, this is where Malcolm came to the crossroad. And this is very serious and very important for Muslims to know. When we talk about Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, Malcolm himself, when he